Welcome back to Explaining Everything, the channel where we dive into the stories and mysteries behind everyday things. Today's question comes from one of our wonderfully curious viewers, Froggy in a Cardigan. Thanks for the suggestion, Froggy. You asked, how did Cottagecore take over the internet? Great question, because one day the internet was all memes and chaos, and the next it was lace curtains, sourdough starters, and people naming their goats Clementine. What happened? So, if you've ever found yourself wanting to run off into the woods with a loaf of bread and a ukulele, stay tuned. We're unraveling the moss-covered mystery of how Cottagecore took over the internet, right here on Explaining Everything. Cottagecore is an aesthetic and a lifestyle and a mood and probably a religion at this point that romanticizes rural life. Think rolling meadows, dried flowers, warm tea, linen everything, and owning a chicken named Beatrice. It's Little House on the Prairie, but make it fashion. It's baking apple pie while reciting Emily Dickinson. It's looking out the window and sighing dramatically while the rain hits the glass. Basically, it's the opposite of whatever Jeff Bezos is doing. But the name Cottagecore really says it all. Cottage. Cute little house in the woods. Core equals aesthetic obsession. Together, Cottagecore. Let's idealize pre-industrial life and pretend we won't get dysentery from unpasteurized milk. Like all mysterious forces in the universe, supernatural phenomena, emotional damage, and niche subcultures, Cottagecore started on Tumblr. Back in the 2010s, Tumblr was already full of moody teenagers romanticizing melancholy, literature, and moss. Naturally, it was fertile soil, pun intended, for an aesthetic that screamed, "I wish I lived in a Jane Austen novel," but without the sexism or the plague. Posts featured foggy forests, lace curtains, herbal teas, and girls in prairie dresses clutching books like they're full of forbidden secrets, which, let's be honest, they probably were. But Cottagecore didn't go mainstream until, well, enter 2020. You may remember it as the year everything fell apart and people began baking banana bread with religious devotion. During lockdown, when we were all trapped in our homes, staring at sourdough starters like they held the meaning of life, Cottagecore exploded on TikTok. Why? Because Cottagecore was basically a collective internet fantasy. It was the emotional support aesthetic for people who were tired of Zoom calls and desperately wanted to frolic. We couldn't go outside, so we imagined we lived in a cottage where our biggest problem was whether the jam would set properly. TikTok creators started filming themselves wandering in forests, arranging flowers, and whispering things like, "I made elderflower cordial today, and then I fed my geese." Geese? Since when do we have geese? Since Cottagecore, that's when. Now, here's the twist. Cottagecore isn't just about baking and picnics. It's also low-key a rebellion. Yes, a rebellion with doilies. Because Cottagecore is anti-capitalist in its own soft-spoken way. It says, what if we just didn't hustle? What if we just existed gently? It's the gentle middle finger to a world obsessed with productivity. Cottagecore whispers, you don't need to grind, babe. Just feed your chickens and vibe. It's also queer-friendly, which is awesome. A lot of LGBTQ+ folks embraced the aesthetic because it provided an escape from societal expectations. Cottagecore became a safe space where you could live authentically and also wear a sun hat bigger than your existential dread. As with all things pure and wholesome on the internet, capitalism saw it and said, "I want a piece of that." Suddenly, every brand was Cottagecore. H&M released prairie dresses. Urban Outfitters started selling rustic furniture that somehow cost more than actual property in rural Ohio. Influencers did photo shoots in flower fields, sponsored by herbal tea companies. Somewhere, a mushroom-shaped lamp became a status symbol. Next thing you know, you're spending $45 on a hand-thrown ceramic cup because it feels authentic. Is it still cottagecore if the only thing rural about your life is the slow Wi-Fi? We don't know, but the aesthetic persisted. At this point, cottagecore isn't even a trend. It's a coping mechanism. It's for when the news is overwhelming, your job is stressful, your rent is due, and you just want to live in a place where your neighbors are dear, and your main job is making jam and emotional eye contact with a squirrel. Cottagecore says, life is hard. Have some fresh scones. And honestly, that's beautiful. So, how did cottagecore take over the internet? Easy, because it made us feel better. It offered an escape when we needed it most. It gave us permission to slow down, to romanticize the mundane, and to pretend that we could solve all of life's problems with a teapot and a fresh baguette. Cottagecore isn't about perfection. It's about coziness. It's about reclaiming softness in a world that demands hardness. And also, again, the frogs. So next time you see someone posting a photo of themselves wearing a linen dress while holding a basket of pears, just remember, they're not crazy. They're just trying to survive late-stage capitalism adorably. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a pie to bake, a meadow to frolic in, and a deeply emotional poem to write about moss. If you enjoyed this video, or if you now have the sudden urge to live your life like Bilbo Baggins, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for tuning in, and join us next time here in the channel that answers all the why, what, who, where, and how questions you've always wondered about, here on Explaining Everything.